Hello gentle listeners, and welcome back to episode 11 of Whispers of the Past. I'm your host, Josh, and today we're setting sail on a voyage into the depths of one of the world's most enduring enigmas, the lost city of Atlantis. Atlantis was rumoured to be a city of great knowledge, wealth, and power, but it supposedly vanished beneath the sea in a single, disastrous night. Was this just a tale? Or could there be some truth behind it? Today, we'll look into where the story came from, the evidence that might support it, the different theories about its location, and why this ancient mystery still fascinates us. So, sit back and let's journey together into the mists of history where truth and myth intertwine. The story of Atlantis begins with Plato, the great philosopher of ancient Greece. Plato lived in the 4th century BCE, a time when the world was full of unexplored lands, forgotten histories, and tales of mighty empires. In two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Criticus, Plato describes Atlantis as a mighty empire, rich beyond imagination, that existed some 9,000 years before his time. According to Plato, Atlantis was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, or what we now know as the Strait of Gibraltar. It was an island of immense beauty and resources, home to an advanced civilization. Plato tells us that the Atlanteans were a powerful, militaristic people, yet they lived in harmony with the natural world, at least for a time. Their capital was a masterpiece of engineering, built with concentric rings of land and water. At the heart of the city stood a magnificent temple dedicated to the god Poseidon, who, according to the legend, was the original ruler of Atlantis. Poseidon, the god of the sea, supposedly created Atlantis by raising the island from the depths of the ocean. He then gave the island to his mortal wife, Cleito, and together they had 5 pairs of twin sons. These sons eventually became the first rulers of Atlantis, each governing one of the 10 regions into which the island was divided. The firstborn son, Atlas, was made king, and from him the island took its name. Atlantis was said to be a utopia, a place of prosperity and peace, with wealth beyond compare. Plato described its fertile lands, its vast herds of animals, and the precious metals that filled its mountains. But it wasn't just material wealth that set Atlantis apart. The Atlanteans were masters of engineering and architecture, building massive bridges, canals, and harbours. Their navy was unmatched, with ships that could sail across the known world. By all accounts, Atlantis was the pinnacle of civilization. Yet, as the story goes, the Atlanteans fell from grace. Over time, they became greedy and corrupt, seeking to expand their empire through conquest and domination. Their ambition led them to wage war on other nations, including the powerful city-state of Athens, and according to Plato, it was the Athenians who, standing alone, managed to defeat the Atlantean forces. Now it's time for a story I've prepared about Atlantis. Long ago, long before the corruption that would lead to its downfall, Atlantis was a paradise unlike any the world had ever seen. The kingdom thrived under the protection of Poseidon, who had blessed the land with a climate of perpetual spring. Its fields stretched for miles, producing an abundance of crops year-round. Golden fruits and the finest grains flourished beneath the warm sun, while towering trees provided shelter for a vast variety of animals. Its people were skilled in the arts of cultivation and architecture, and the city's magnificence reflected this. The central city of Atlantis was built around a series of concentric canals, each one gleaming with a reflection of the sun and moon, and at its heart lay the majestic temple of Poseidon, surrounded by a grove of sacred trees. The temple was constructed of pure auriculum, a metal more precious than gold, and within it stood a colossal statue of the sea god, holding his trident aloft. From this center, the Atlantean kings governed with wisdom and compassion, ensuring that the riches of the land were shared among the people. During the reign of Atlas, the eldest son of Poseidon, Atlantis entered its golden age. Under his rule, the Atlanteans built a society that celebrated knowledge, harmony, and balance with nature. Scholars from across the known world visited Atlantis to study its libraries that were filled with scrolls of ancient knowledge. Architects constructed monumental palaces and temples, each more grand than the last, that they designed to reflect the divine perfection they believed their city represented. The Atlanteans were not only master builders, but also astronomers, sailors, and mathematicians, and they used their advanced knowledge to expand their influence far beyond their island. Yet, even in this age of glory, shadows began to creep into the hearts of some. Stories tell of the rise of the Brothers of Atlas. They were ambitious and hungry for power. The younger princes, jealous of Atlas's authority, began to covet the riches of the lands beyond their borders. They began persuading the Council of Elders that Atlantis was destined to rule over the world, not just its island kingdom. The people had grown restless, and like the young princes, they desired more. Their once noble pursuits of knowledge and peace were tainted by greed, and soon Atlantis began to shift its gaze outward. The expansion began slowly, with trade agreements, alliances with distant lands, and diplomatic missions, but the true hidden goal was conquest. The Atlanteans had built an immense fleet, and they sent ships to every corner of the known world. They established colonies on faraway islands, trading their goods for gold, silver, and slaves, and as their empire grew, so did their arrogance. They believed themselves invincible, chosen by the gods to rule over all. The downfall came when Atlantis turned its eyes towards Athens, the last free city of the Mediterranean. The Athenians refused to bend to Atlantis' will, and, in a show of defiance, they gathered their armies and met the Atlantean forces on the battlefield. Even armed with inferior armor and weapons, against all odds, the Athenians triumphed, striking a devastating blow to the pride of Atlantis. Humiliated and weakened, the Atlanteans returned to their island. Division and greed began to tear their society apart. Factions formed within the royal family which vied for control, and civil war broke out. The once unified and great people of Atlantis began to turn against one another. Their once great empire was now on the verge of collapse, and amidst this turmoil, the gods themselves turned their backs on Atlantis. They had enraged Poseidon. He was furious at the hubris of his descendants, and so he unleashed his wrath upon the island. It began with tremors deep beneath the sea, a warning that the arrogant Atlanteans ignored, and soon the earth quaked violently, shaking the very foundations of the city. This caused great cracks to open in the ground that swallowed buildings whole. The sea, once a source of life and prosperity, rose up against the island, its waters crashing over the canals and streets. In one cataclysmic moment, Atlantis was consumed by the ocean. The great city, with all its wonders and secrets, disappeared beneath the waves, lost forever. For days after the disaster, the sea still churned with Poseidon's wrath, and the remnants of the once great Atlantis was scattered across the ocean floor. The survivors, few in number, were left to wander the coasts of distant lands, their home nothing more than a memory, and over time, the story of Atlantis passed into legend, or cautionary tale told by the survivors to future generations of the dangers of greed and the wrath of the gods. And so, Atlantis, the once great empire became a myth. Its splendor forever lost to the depths of the sea. The story is dramatic, no doubt, but it leaves us with so many questions. Was Atlantis a real place? A powerful civilization lost to time and disaster? Or was Plato using Atlantis as a metaphor, a warning against the dangers of pride and imperial overreach? The idea that Atlantis might have been a real place has fascinated people for centuries. So, now let's look at some of the theories. I'd like to start with one of the most compelling, that Plato's description of Atlantis was inspired by the eruption of Thera, now called Santorini. The volcanic island of Thera, located in the Aegean Sea, was home to the Minoan civilization, which was a sophisticated and powerful society in its own right. Around 1600 BCE, a massive volcanic eruption devastated the island and much of the surrounding region. This eruption sent ash clouds into the sky and caused widespread destruction. It's believed that this may have been the event that led to the collapse of the Minoan civilization. In some ways, the Minoans match Plato's description of Atlantis. They were an advanced, seafaring people with a rich culture and expansive trade networks. Their palaces were adorned with frescoes and sophisticated architecture, which was much like the splendor attributed to Atlantis. So, could Plato have been drawing on stories of this ancient catastrophe that had been passed down through generations? However, the timeline doesn't quite match Plato's. He places the fall of Atlantis 9,000 years before his own time, whereas the eruption of Thera occurred much closer to Plato's era. Still, it's possible that the numbers were symbolic, or that he exaggerated for dramatic effect. As with many ancient legends, details are often murky, and timelines may be symbolic or exaggerated to convey larger themes. But the eruption of Thera remains one of the strongest contenders for a real-world event that could have inspired Plato's tale of Atlantis. It wasn't just the destruction that stands out, but also the sophisticated civilization that, in a seemingly godly act of wrath, was suddenly lost and swallowed by the sea. But even if we accept that the Minoans might have inspired Atlantis, it doesn't answer the full question. Was Atlantis entirely fictional, or was Plato using real events to create a deeper allegory? It's important to remember that Plato was a philosopher first and foremost. Many of his writings, including the Timaeus and Critias dialogues, were moral teachings. Atlantis could have been Plato's way of demonstrating the dangers of hubris, greed, and the collapse of morality in even the most advanced societies. And yet, the allure of Atlantis being real is just so hard to resist. Over the centuries, explorers, scholars, and treasure hunters have all tried to pinpoint its location. Some believe Atlantis might be hidden beneath the waves of the Mediterranean, possibly near Spain, or perhaps beneath the vast sands of the Sahara Desert, where some point to the Richat structure, also known as the Eye of the Sahara, as a potential candidate for the remains of the lost city. The Richat structure, a massive geological formation that resembles a set of concentric circles, has drawn attention due to a similarity to Plato's description of Atlantis. However, geologists believe that the Richat was formed naturally and not by human hands. Still, there are those who believe that its location in the Sahara, a region that was once fertile and full of water, could fit with a prehistoric, long-forgotten civilization. Another theory places Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, with proponents suggesting it could be buried beneath the ocean floor somewhere near the Azores Islands, or even the Caribbean. Some fringe theorists, emboldened by 20th century works like Ignatius Donnelly's Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, propose that Atlantis was the origin of all advanced ancient civilizations, from Egypt to the Americas. But despite all these fascinating hypotheses, no definitive proof of Atlantis has ever been found. Underwater archaeology has yet to reveal the fabled city, and every new discovery tends to open more questions than answers. Whether or not Atlantis exists as Plato described, the mystery of its fate continues to intrigue us. At this point, it's worth asking, why does Atlantis captivate us so much? What is it about the idea of a lost city swallowed by the sea that resonates with us on such a deep level? Is it the romance of an ancient civilization lost to time, or is it the haunting reminder of how fragile even the greatest empires can be? For many, Atlantis represents the ultimate mystery, a world that existed on the edge of our knowledge, a place of advanced culture and immense power, wiped out in a single moment by forces beyond its control. Its story strikes at the heart of human ambition, showing us both the heights we can achieve and the dangers that lie in unchecked greed and hubris. But Atlantis is also a story of hope, the possibility that somewhere, beneath the waves or the sands, lies a forgotten civilization waiting to be rediscovered. It speaks to our innate curiosity, our desire to uncover what has been lost, and our drive to explore the unknown. Whether we ever find Atlantis or not, its story remains a powerful reminder of both our history and our imagination. So, what are we to make of this story? Is Atlantis a real place, waiting to be discovered beneath the waves? Or is it a myth, a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and the fragility of even the greatest civilization? In the end, the answer may lie somewhere in between. Perhaps Plato's Atlantis was a blend of history and imagination. A story inspired by real events, but embellished with the grandeur and drama that only myth can provide. Or perhaps it was simply a philosophical allegory, a reminder that even the mightiest empires can fall if they lose sight of their moral compass. What is certain is that the legend of Atlantis continues to captivate us. It speaks to something deep within us, the desire to discover what has been lost, to uncover the secrets of the past, and to imagine a world that once was, but is no more. Atlantis may never be found, but its story endures, whispering to us through the ages, reminding us that history is full of mysteries yet to be solved. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the legend of Atlantis. Whether it was a real place or just a cautionary tale, Atlantis remains one of history's greatest mysteries, and I hope today's exploration has sparked your curiosity. If you enjoyed this episode of Whispers of the Past, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, or send a review to whispersofthepastreviews@gmail.com, and share the podcast with fellow history enthusiasts and mystery seekers. Until next time, I'm Josh, this was Whispers of the Past, and I hope to have you again to listen to my tales.